We're back live with you tonight, here on In Focus, and thanks for staying on. There's been broad complaints from big political parties, small ones, including independents, including the ruling ANC, on how they have received coverage on the build-up to these elections. The latest being that levelled against South African Broadcasting Corporation, refusing, the claim is, to broadcast former President Jacob Zuma's expressed views. Well, tonight, we ask the question, has the road to the May 29 elections been equal or equitable when it comes to coverage? And what does this mean? And can the broadcasting do anything to pacify all parties? To help us get into that conversation, let's speak now with Media Monitoring Africa Director William Bird, political analyst Mpumelelo Phungula, and ICASA Council chairperson Mothibi Ramusi. Gentlemen, good evening. Good to have you, and thank you very much for coming on this evening here on In Focus. Chairperson, let's begin with you, maybe, with the various acts that you've got to deal with: the ICASA Act, the Broadcast Act, the Electronic Communications Act, the Constitution, everything else, IEC incorporated in there. What does it mean to ICASA when you hear parties, for example, say, well, I've been banned from my interview being played, or people saying, well, we are seeing a state-sponsored address by the president tonight, and so on and so forth. Independents saying we are not getting our equitable share. What does that complaint say to you?
Good evening, Thabo. Thank you very much to the Newzroom Afrika to have given us an opportunity as ICASA. Yeah, the question that you've just asked, it's quite important. But I think from our side, we do have regulations that manages the electoral processes. And we've got the Electronic Communication Act that has prescribed how the elections political parties should conduct themselves. I'm glad to inform the public that the current prescripts that we have in South Africa, we have made provisions to allow political parties to continue with their advertisements in an equitable manner. At the same time, we have allowed the broadcasters to make sure that as and when any political party flight their advert, all of them are given equal rights, equal space. And how we have done it, Thabo, from ICASA, we have allocated slots to all political parties, and as a way of monitoring to make sure that each and everyone has an opportunity to provide their messages. That's how we monitor and manage them from ICASA using all our prescripts. That's how it's being done at the moment.
So there are three areas. There is what you'd call public service announcements, which is mostly done by government. And maybe let's not focus on that right now. But there is public party election broadcast, and there is political advertisements, which are two different things. And I suppose they are treated differently as well. How would you say you have fared, and how have political parties, independents, and everyone been given their share in that particular space?
As I've indicated, I mean, through the allocation of the slots that we did in April, that's the first method. But obviously, from any citizen in the country, if you feel aggrieved, or if there's any other political party that feels that they are not given that equitable spread in terms of advertising or talking about their plans, we've got a consumer committee, which is one of our council committee that looks at all the complaints that gets lodged. So in terms of managing any consumer issues to protect any other issues that may be coming from either yourself or any political party. So we do have a governance structure that deals with that, both from the public and the political parties themselves, including yourself as broadcasters. So CCC, it's there not just for only political parties, but inclusive to everyone in the country.
William, let's bring you in. Section 57, subsection 4 of the Electronic Communications Act speaks of equitable treatment, not necessarily equal treatment. How did, in your view, broadcasters balance that aspect of things, equitable and equal, without distorting the news value of the stations and the processes, of course, that editors go through?
Good evening. Well, I think there are a couple of points to notice. As you point out, is it can't be equal. Broadcasters, unlike when you're on the internet, you've got a very limited period of time. This program is a limited period of time, so you can't have 55 voices speaking. And yet we know that there are many parties, many independents. So being able to give them all equal coverage is simply not possible. So what broadcasters do is they work on an elections plan. Many of them have done it at least by January, for example. They've worked on a plan on how they're going to cover and report on the elections, and that they are very careful about making sure that they give equitable coverage. So they make sure that they look usually at the seats in Parliament, for example, and they take a little bit of guidance from that as to the kind of amount of coverage that they might want to give to particular parties or entities. If you get an entity like MK, for example, which is a complete unknown, it's a brand new party. There's no record in Parliament for it, for example. There they look at it and they look at other factors to determine whether or not they're going to cover that. So just to be clear, when you're looking at these things, you're looking at how the news and editorial side of these media cover that. And that's very different to what the ICASA chairs outlined, which is party election broadcasts and party and political advertising. So when you look at these things, and that's what we've been doing for the last several months, and you can look at that elections dashboard. It's near live on our website. You can see exactly how the different media have in fact been covering the various political parties. So if you're one of the bigger parties, you're probably going to be a little bit unhappy because you're not getting the kind of coverage that you want. If you're one of the smaller parties, and certainly if you're an independent, you can probably feel aggrieved to some degree that you're not getting what you might think is a fair shake. So it's a really hard thing for news organizations to balance and to get right. But what is interesting is that most of them tend to cover things in a very similar way. What we've seen in this period that has been particularly striking is the amount of coverage given to the MK party. That's largely because of how they've manufactured and engineered issues that have driven the news agenda and shaped the news agenda. They've behaved a lot like the EFF have historically, which is to say there have been events, there have been comments and remarks and ideas that the news organizations have considered newsworthy, and so they've tended to get a lot more coverage than certainly they're likely to get representation in Parliament.
Mpumelelo, what do political parties stand to gain from complaining about, I suppose, editorial decisions that are seemingly not in their favor, even though if you look at William Byrd's numbers, they'll tell you that there's been a fair coverage, for example, of the ANC, a fair coverage of MK party and so on and so forth.
I think what's to gain is exactly what the political parties are being given now, which is publicity. The fact that they laid a complaint has created a platform for the story or the discussion to be had as we are having it now on TV. You would know also in the specific case of the MK party leader, Mr. Jacob Zuma, that he has relied on a victimhood narrative as a political strategy to garner public sympathy and support. So I would think also the smaller parties and independents would also follow on and use that strategy to appeal to the public to say that they are not being given enough airtime, and thereby, as it is happening now, get a bit more airtime.
Are broadcasters acting under political pressure? And what's your take? Have they acted under political pressure in terms of the editorial decisions that were made?
It's hard for me as a non-media expert to comment on editorial decisions and how the backroom of the media works. But as a person with some knowledge on how politics works, I would say that the SABC did miss a mark by not considering the context that we're in. We are 3 days, actually tomorrow the special votes start, and the main election is on Wednesday. it was, I think, it would have been prudent for the SABC to give the former president, Jacob Zuma, some time to air his views about his new party, because also there's the sentiment that, especially today, the president was seen speaking on behalf of the ANC, and he also got an opportunity to also speak as the leader of government. So a lot of people out there tend not to make that distinction between the state and the party. And it's hard for us to blame them, because sometimes the party does blare the distinction between party and state. So to the ordinary onlooker or observer, it would seem President Ramaphosa and the ANC are getting a disproportionate amount of time because of that in the media.
William, you're saying no. Former President Jacob Zuma, as leader of MK, was not supposed to be given the interview.
No, what I was saying no to was the suggestion in the video that was released that his views were banned somehow from the SABC. The SABC have issued a press statement on this, setting out their take on events, and we've got nothing to disprove that at this point in time, which is that if you look at it, they covered the MK rally, as did almost all of the media. Newzroom Afrika, ENCA, they all covered it, as they should, because it's an important event. But to then go and say that they were denied that the interview was then shelved, it is, according to the press release, certainly not accurate. And again, if you look at the actual media coverage, because we've been analyzing the media coverage across SABC services and about 90 other different media, you can see that MK is getting coverage. So to suggest that the former president is not getting any airtime or coverage from these news channels is simply not accurate. Where I would agree with your other guest is certainly on the perceived abuse of airtime by the current president of the country, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, where the language and the discourse he used, even though he didn't say ANC in his address, the language and discourse that he was using was clearly the same language and discourse that the ANC is using in their current electioneering and campaigning. Yeah. And that kind of thing, I think if you're any other political party, you'd be rightly aggrieved that he was given this when it was pitched as an address to the nation. The first part seemed to be about wishing well and the importance of voting, which I think we could probably all have dealt with and said, yes, that's fair and fine. But then when the moment he left that and diverted from that, you could then see that he was getting, 20 minutes extra of coverage afforded just to effectively campaigning. Yeah.
I wonder what ICASA thinks of that. Let me take a break, Chairperson. I'll give you a chance to respond to how you view that address by the president. Let's hear you speak on 072-110-5584. Do you believe parties got equal or equitable coverage of the build-up to these elections? What are your views? We'll take those thoughts in a moment. We're back shortly. Chairperson, what does this address by the president look like to ICASA? Is this part of a PSA? Even though others are saying it's a pitch to voters, especially in this last minute of the campaign, and it is an abuse of power and state-sponsored really campaign.
Thank you, Thabo. As I've said earlier on, anything to do with elections, it's been managed through prescribed regulations as guided by our acts. So for tonight, as an independent person now talking to you, I've seen that speech from the President of the Republic as addressing the family, which is the entire country. So I wouldn't even want to align that to any political pitching, as I've indicated. If it was something to do with a party that he represents, then that would have been a response that I will give in terms of the prescripts of the law. But for tonight, my view is he was addressing the nation. I'll put it to that for now.
All right.
And he's got the right. I think he's got the right as a president of the Republic to inform us of any other things that we need to know as citizens. So that's how I view his address tonight.
Yeah. Is the media coverage not aimed at increasing recognition? And if so, why is the scale, even when you do your allocation, almost tilted towards the bigger parties than actually giving the guys that need the space more, the space to emerge?
Yeah, I think, Thabo, on that one, as I've indicated, the slots that we have provided or allocated in terms of percentages, the good thing that I need to report to our viewers as well and listeners, we have recently appointed electoral officers who are actually going to be doing actual monitoring of all the discussions, ads that are being flighted from different medium. So from our side, I think given what we would have assessed, we will come back to yourself. And as you know, that even the CCC, post-elections, if there's still unhappiness, there are recommendations that can still be made towards us as authority. So it's a going on process, but like as I've indicated, we are actually strictly going to work within the prescripts of the law. So I don't want to be diverting on a feeling because, sometimes I can say things that are not within our laws. But let me put it to you that for now, any other monitoring aspects, as ICASA, we have put in additional measures so that we can give confidence to all the electorates pre and post-election in terms of monitoring the activities. Thank you.
Yeah. Mpumelelo, are we defining the problem correctly here? I mean, is there a way of pacifying all political parties in how they are covered in terms of broadcast? Because you will end up with, of course, being stations and broadcasters and newspapers writing replies of replies. It's not necessarily any value to those publications.
I think it would be very, very difficult, especially given that there are so many political parties contesting our political space. We've got way more than we had the last time around. And I guess this is because of the political mood in the country. A lot of people still feel that they are not represented by the current or existing political parties. I think it would be a good idea for the authorities out there to do more work in terms of educating the public on the regulations and all the rules related to this equitable share that is given to political parties around this time. I think that would then limit not only the expectation from the political parties who, I might say, do know, who might know what the rules are or what the proportion of their proportion of time that they'll get in the media is. But because of the nature of politics, they may want to appeal to public sympathy by putting out messages that they are not getting enough time. So to eliminate this, it would be wise for the broadcasters to actually put it out there clearly before these times of contestations, so that the public is well aware what to expect.
Speaking of sympathizers, will a complaint by Jacob Zuma, for example, deepen skepticism in the legitimacy of the process, which many are saying that would have been the aim of it in terms of the video that he put out?
I think in line with his what I'd call the victimhood political strategy, I think this works quite well for the former president, because also you would realize that in his interview, he went for the judiciary as well. It just didn't stop at saying the SABC and indeed the ENCA have not given him, have basically given him a media blackout. He didn't stop there. He actually also took a swipe at the judiciary, making a reference, well, not directly, but to the case, the Constitutional Court case that ruled that was against him and sent him to prison. He knows that quite a lot of people on the ground who may not be legal experts do not understand how somebody can be sent to prison without actually a trial. So he's using all of that, as well as his messaging that, like, the reason behind starting the MK is that there's Ramaphosa's ANC, which is, according to him, taking us back to the days of oppression. So this is like a very good opportunity for him to push that narrative.
Yeah. William, why don't you say how important are these traditional platforms, so to speak, if we use them, your public broadcaster or even independent broadcasters now, with most political parties, especially the big ones, like the Democratic Alliance, the ANC, EFF, even MK, have got their own social media machinery that they use to promote their messaging?
I mean, there's a sense in which people thought that traditional media would actually have less value as you have more social media and these sorts of things. But of course, the problem is that with that, you don't know what's true and what isn't. You expect political parties to exaggerate and, only spin you the best sides of who they are and what they've done and what they do, and etc. Right? They're not going to be the ones that are going to come out and say, we had a plan to do this and we haven't done it, or we've done this and we haven't done that. And one of the reasons you need credible media and journalism is precisely because you need them to be pointing out what political parties are actually about. If you just relied on what political parties said, you would be easily thinking that, in this instance this evening, that Mr. Zuma was not allowed on SABC. You'd be believing all of those sorts of things. You need news media to be able to say, well, hang on a minute, this is actually the context. These are actually the issues that we can explain, and this is the evidence that we've got to support this. So news media now, even though there are fewer of them and their resources are severely constrained, their role in this elections period is absolutely critical. It's as important as running free, fair, credible elections, precisely because the role that journalism plays is part of determining whether elections are free, fair, and credible. So being able to go out there, give an independent voice that's on, what happened at the rally, as opposed to going and interviewing people that attended it who are the party faithful, getting an actual view from a journalist to say, well, this is what they said, but people didn't believe it in the crowd, or everyone was wildly excited about these particular elements and not these others. So news media is vitally important for helping us understand and navigate the elections, understand the political parties, what they're for, what they're against, and which ones, are trying to pull the wool over our eyes.
Yeah. In terms of your monitoring methodology, as you put it. Yes.
Yeah, Thabo. Yeah, I think, Thabo, it's Mothibi here.
Yes,
just to chip in. Yeah, I think just to chip in on one very important aspect. I think it's important for the viewers as well, and I agree with Mpumelelo when it comes to outreach in terms of education. It's one of the things that ICASA will be doing, because you might have seen of late, it's quite clear that educational program, especially on electoral periods, on how people should conduct themselves, the independent candidates, it's going to be important in preparation for the municipality elections, that even our regulations, where there's an opportunity to amend and align so that there's no ambiguity in terms of our rules, because as you know, issues of national symbols, we need to make reference to such things so that people don't have doubts as and when you talk about advertising or free. And again, what is important, it's to differentiate between what people talk of political adverts, those you pay for, any political party pays for. But when you talk about the political election broadcast, the PEB, because it's important to educate, those are free of charge. We are allocated by ICASA. So it's important just to put that distinct between the two. And again, in terms of airtime allocation, before we finalize the regulation, that consultation happened, because we don't just provide allocation, but to the public, it's important as part of this outreach to know that as we are now going towards municipality elections in the next coming years, that kind of a provincial ward municipality. We will be doing that as ICASA in partnership with our other sister regulators.
Yeah.
The issue you've raised now in terms of social media platforms, with the Film and Publication Board, the .za Domain Authority partnership, we're now putting together a regulators forum because we have taken note that for time, people are using social media to campaign. So we need to have that partnership so that things are aligned and you are stayed informed. Thanks.
So still on that aspect of education, many people would ask, how did ICASA reach the decision, or the CCC at least, to say the SABC was wrong to ban the advert, which got everybody up in arms? You know, you're banning a national symbol. It was quite a divisive conversation that was going on. If you want to educate people about how do you reach that kind of a decision in an environment where they would say, well, public opinion largely was saying this is a national symbol that should be protected. Let me take a break quickly, and then we'll wrap it up when we return. Let's speak about that in a moment. 072-110-5584. Take your views as well. Media Monitoring Africa Director William Bird, political analyst Mpumelelo Phungula, and ICASA Council Chairperson Mothibi Ramusi with us. All right, we're back in a moment. Yeah, I was asking that education that many people would have looked at your decision and say, we are quite confused because we thought this was a national symbol and shouldn't be banned. How does ICASA come to that decision?
Thank you, Thabo. As I've indicated earlier on, Thabo, the issue here is in terms of our prescribed regulations that governs the elections. We have the Electronic Communication Act. The Act actually allows a broadcaster to provide provision to all political parties to publicize their adverts as and when. I'm just going to make it very simple to the viewers as well, that if there's a need to advertise a political party's advert and the other party feels that we are not given the same time of an opportunity, you have the right as a broadcaster to object to that. There's a process that is outlined. And at the same time, Thabo, it's important that as part of your editorial prescripts, it's very important that you need to define in your electoral prescript what are the things that you are supposed to be doing and those that are not supposed to be flighted. Now, within our regulations, broadcasters do have the right not to flight any advert that is not within the spirits of the ECA Act or the Constitution or any other prescripts that is aligned to those issues that I've just mentioned. Now, in this instance, we were dealing with a situation where citing of the applicable regulation was not the main issue of contention. It was more about, I've got an editorial and I've read section 58.1 of the ECA, and the interpretation read with our regulation. It's something that I'm going to encourage any broadcaster that when you read our prescripts, it's important that you read the Act aligned to its prescribed regulations, because the regulations, if you're going to be lodging a complaint, your complaint needs to be aligned to a specific prescript of the law. So in this instance, as part of our education, it's very important we're dealing with laws. It's not about what people are saying about an advert, but it becomes important to point to the right prescript so that when we engage, Thabo, it's not something that it's a hearsay. You can always direct me as a regulator to say that ICASA, in terms of section 6.9, I have denied somebody a right to flight their adverts because I did it within the prescript. It becomes very important because if you don't do that, Thabo, it will come as if the authority, independently so, we are making decisions that are not factual to the country. But I can give you in good confidence that the CCC applied their minds, and we are sitting with a situation that I said earlier on. We now have an opportunity that in all our prescripts, and I'm advising you as well as Newzroom, that as and when you read our electoral codes in preparation for the next election, make sure that if there are any gaps that you know as professionals, let's sit and engage with ICASA so that we avoid this kind of things that we see, because rules are rules, Thabo. It's not about, I think this is why I need to be telling. And for example, if you flight your advert today and tomorrow you decide to cut it off, it means something. I mean, I take it that before you go on air, you go through a quality assurance. You make sure that your editorial team, they sit and say, we like this. Now, you cannot do something, then from there you make a reverse. Then it becomes a problem because our rules are very clear. Once you've done an advert and there's an objection from somebody else, then we've got the right then to go in and look at what actually informed you to do certain actions. So I thought it's important to raise this because, I don't want it
it's rather as important. It's rather as important.
Thank you.
William, I put a question earlier on to Mpumelelo. Are broadcasters acting under political pressure? It's very easy to look at the SABC as a public broadcaster, I suppose, and say, are they acting under political pressure? But they are private entities as well. Are they acting under investor pressure, maybe?
I mean, I suspect that you'll hear instances where there are allegations of these things. Certainly when the SABC took the extraordinary decision to ban that DA advertisement, there was a sense that not that they had bowed to direct pressure, but that they had opted on some level to self-censor on the basis of a perceived pressure that may come. If you look at their news, it's overwhelmingly fair. There's nothing to suggest that any political party has influenced their news, and that's largely the case with all of our broadcasters, in fact, at this point in time. So there's no doubt there are political pressures. We see, especially in small community media and small commercial media, that there the pressures are often a lot closer to home. You know, they'll kick you out of the offices that they're letting you use, or they'll threaten your life or your family if you don't, toe the line. So those kinds of things do occur, and that's a lot harder to deal with. But by and large, our media have thus far performed exceptionally well in terms of the fairness of the coverage that they are meeting. And certainly that's true of Newzroom Afrika and of ENCA and of the SABC.
Well, as we wrap up, I mean, your views, we have spoken about MK Party, but it's not only MK Party. I mean, it's even the ANC that is complaining about being decampaigned. I mean, is there any credence to their claim of media houses that have been working against them?
I think understanding the environment that we're in, we're just a day away from, in fact, 3 days away from the main election, but tomorrow the people who were granted special votes can vote. There will always be such complaints. Whether or not they are valid is something else. I did hear some ANC leaders complaining that they are being bashed in the media, that whatever positives that come from the ANC are not put out there. It's only the negatives that are put out there. So this is, it's in the nature of the beast. There is no way that we'll come to a point where there aren't any complaints. But what I think is important is that for more predictability, we actually need to have more civic education. The powers that be in the media need to actually go out there and educate the public on the rights that political parties have, and indeed that the public have to hear from their political leaders. I think that will help resolve the situation, but I don't think we'll come to a point where these complaints are eliminated.
I appreciate you, gentlemen. Thank you very much for coming on. William Bird, Mpumelelo Phungula, as well as Mothibi Ramusi. We thank. Yes.
Just one last announcement. Just to note that 7 o'clock tomorrow, it's the cutoff for the electoral announcements, political campaigning, obviously from all the media houses. So I think it's an important issue to note from 7 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Appreciate it. Fantastic.
And we've given SABC, obviously, with the DA, an opportunity to read the CCC judgment. So let's give them time as well to reflect on that. But tomorrow, 7 o'clock, it's a cut. Thank you.
Much appreciated.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. That is the chairperson of ICASA's Council, the Mothibi Ramusi. Up next, Ziyanda Ngobo sat down with the former president and leader of the MK party in a one-on-one interview. Leader President Jacob Zuma will be, of course, in that conversation next.